you got to have ownership. You have to understand where your role as a leader failed to set that person up for success, whether it be lack of communication, whether it be lack of training, whether it be lack of opportunity to execute. And yeah, it's not about removing responsibility, but it's about understanding, like, I, as a leader, I could have done better to put them in a better situation.
Well, today's guest on the Breakaway Talk podcast is passionate about leadership and obsessed with the idea that leaders are needed in every sphere and every walk of life. Mark Betts is dedicated to the development of the leaders around him. With over a decade of leadership experience in corporate America, Mark has an MBA. He's certified social styles facilitator and developer of the Lead Your Sphere Leadership Development Program. And oh, by the way, Mark has also served as an ultimate frisbee coach at Breakaway sports camps, and a really endearing one, I want to add. The kids absolutely love Mark as a coach, and we appreciate him as well. Welcome to the Breakaway Talk podcast, Mark Betts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Mark, the first thing I want to start off with is you are a girl dad. Yes. You're living the dream as a girl dad. Tell us about life as a girl dad in the Betts household.
Oh man, it's great. Lots of dresses and dress up and pink and unicorns, and all of my two older girls, they're just obsessed with princesses and just dancing and singing, and so lots of Disney princess movies going on. We like to do a pizza movie night every Friday night. So as a family, so there's plenty of, princess movies and castles and all that kind of stuff, man. So it's a lot of fun though. Probably my favorite thing, honestly, is just, they're young. My oldest is 5, and, but as they've are growing, just to be able to see little bits and pieces of both me and my wife, and in each of them, both the good and the bad, but each as they develop into their own personality. I remember early on with our oldest, it was like, okay, well, this is what it's like having a kid. And then the second one comes along, Evelyn, and she's so different, in just the most fantastic ways. And so, you kind of, all right, we got this thing figured out. And then the second one comes along, and the parenting and everything it's got to be different because it's, she's a different kid. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, man. But it's great, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So
we talk a lot about leadership on this podcast. I'm curious, when did you begin to take leadership seriously? Like, was there a person or a particular context that became the catalyst for your leadership passion? Where did all that begin?
Yeah, man, I would say, it was a particular person within a certain context that really kind of gave me a word of what it was that I had always kind of felt. I've always been a very competitive, very results driven, very, trying to think of the next thing. And so in a lot of ways, I think there's some natural leaning towards, some solid leadership qualities. But, when I started in retail, it didn't take long before my manager at the time, recognized some leadership qualities in me, gave me an opportunity to step into a leadership role on the team, and really just helped me he just gave me a book. It wasn't some big long speech, it was just the beginning of our relationship, as now we're just consider each other friends and mentors even for each other. And so I was reading the book. It was John C. Maxwell, Developing the Leaders Around You. And I read it, and I was like, so that's what you call this. And really from there, it just, I kept reading, keep reading. And I began to understand that what I was passionate about was yeah, just developing people and helping them learn to navigate with other people, how to inspire teams, and how to get results from a group of people. So yeah, I would say within that context, my manager, he really set me on the path of being able to say leadership is what I'm passionate about.
And now you have formed Entasi Leadership Consulting, a leadership agency that helps teams navigate healthy levels of tension to unlock maximum performance. So tell us the meaning behind the name Entasi and the concepts behind your work.
Yeah. Entasi, I mean, I knew I was trying to start this agency, something that I'm very passionate about, but I wanted the right name. And so, there's lots of things like Pinnacle or Summit or things like that. And they just felt maybe a little, I don't want to say overused, but it didn't feel like it was me. And honestly, just a Google search and just for several weeks, just trying to, think of ideas, and Google searched it. And Entity is inspired by, the Greek word for attention. And so I was like, well, it sounds good. It's not being used by anybody else. And really from there, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is perfect. It really embodies, just that idea of finding healthy levels of tension.
Anybody who's been in leadership any significant amount of time understands that tension is always a part of it, right? Because the whole idea behind leadership is that we're leading, and we're trying to lead ourselves first and foremost.
Yeah, definitely.
In tension, but then also, beckoning others to also be stretched out of their comfort zone and get behind an idea, a vision, a concept, or a product, something that we know is bigger than ourselves. And that means that tension is going to be involved with that. And I love how you word this, because it really conveys the idea of embracing the tension. Mm-hmm. And many people struggle with the idea of tension. They don't want to have issues with conflict or the awkwardness of tension. But even in developing muscles, as I think about growth in muscles, it requires tension in the gym in order for muscles to develop, right? So it stands the reason that if we apply these principles in the leadership sphere as well, then we can grow and we can see good results with that. So you talk about this, and this is on your website. You talk about the idea of harnessing tension in leadership, and that tension is necessary to get things done. And you also refer to tension in two types: the task tension and the relationship tension. So take us a little bit deeper into the differences between those two types of tension, and also how they might play out on a team.
Yeah, for sure. I always kind of think about it with relationship tension first, because I think a lot of times when you are talking about tension, that people think about, oh, I had tension with a person, and so I feel like that's the easiest kind of spot to start. And there's in my head there's a graph. The relationship tension, the more productive you want your team to be, the lower the relationship tension needs to be. So there's kind of a downslope of what you're aiming for with that relationship tension.
Okay.
We've all been in situations or on a team where you don't see eye to eye, or there's even worse, maybe there's actually a breach in the relationship. There's a breach in trust. People they aren't getting along, and everything breaks down from there. If you don't have to necessarily be best friends, but lines of communication have to be open on the team. And when there's a high level of relationship tension, the vision for the team, the goals of the team, end up taking a backseat to the personalities and the personal tension between however many people. And so the team isn't able to move forward towards the goal, the mission, and making that vision come to life, because everybody's too busy, for lack of better words, kind of infighting, if that's kind of a drastic way to look at it. But And so, there's obviously healthy levels of that. And, there could be maybe even situations where there's too low of relationship tension in a workplace environment where that kind of leads into, things aren't getting done because maybe people are too good of friends, or maybe there's a certain level of, professionalism that needs to happen in that type of setting. And maybe that's just not there. And so things aren't moving forward there. So there's definitely and that's why I always want to be clear that it's not just about, lowering relationship tension all the way and getting task tension as high as possible so that, everything is just task oriented. Because you do have to have, it's a healthy level. It's not just full send one way or the other. And that's really the challenge. And then with task tension too, it's this idea that there's a task that needs to be done. And no team, no group of people is going to move forward and accomplish a goal unless they understand, like, hey, there's deadlines. There are, things on the checklist that need to be done. There are certain benchmarks, whatever you want to call those things. It's task tension is an awareness that there is a task that needs to be done. And so the lower that is, that's, an example of that is a team where, deadlines are missed a lot. Everybody's kind of lackadaisical. There's just no real urgency for, hey, what needs to get done. And so in general, I think of task tension, we want to try to push that higher, into that healthy level, but you don't want to go so high where, the only thing that matters is the task and the people don't matter, and get into kind of micromanaging or, things like that. So yeah, that's kind of it. And in that nutshell there, they're both kind of on a spectrum. And so the goal is to learn how to deal with people and learn how to, maintain productive conversations within that task tension, but also understanding, like, hey, we need to keep moving forward. So here's the goal, and this is what we're trying to work for.
That's good stuff. I like that contrast there between the task and relationship. When you speak of the relationship tension, it reminds me of the imagery of having a sparring partner. Maybe as a prize fighter is preparing, for a big match or something. He's got to get into the ring and, spar with a partner who's actually going to bring out the best, stretch him, right, for the task that is ahead of him and such. And I've served in pastoral leadership. My wife and I have done quite a bit of marriage counseling and premarital counseling, and that's one thing that we always bring up is that, with your spouse, with your mate, you don't need somebody that you just need to win over in an argument, but you need a sparring partner who's going to stretch you in that conflict, in that disagreement, and both of you are going to find the win on the other side of that. So the imagery of a sparring partner stretching that fighter to be the best fighter that one can be, and whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in marriage, in ministry spheres, right? Sparring with people can be a very healthy tension if we're both looking for the right outcomes, the right win on the other end.
Yeah, if you go with that imagery even further, in order to have a sparring partner that's truly effective, what do you need? You need to be in a healthy relationship with them, because if you're not, they're not going to be necessarily interested in helping you get to the levels you need to be. But you also, there's a task in mind. You're not just sparring just for the fun. If you're a championship fighter and you're getting ready for a match, the task is to go out there and win. So the sparring itself isn't the task, but it's a preparation. And so having healthy levels of tension between you and your sparring partner, you got to have it in order to really maximize what that event is going to give.
Yeah, that is great imagery. So I want to talk about something that you've written about on your website, and it's something that I have also written about in one of my books, and it's called the Japanese Art of Kintsugi.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you, Mark, how I first landed on this this art, if you will, how I was
Okay.
first introduced to it. We were on our honeymoon in 1996 in South Carolina, and Hilton Head Island. I remember buying a coffee mug that I kept for years and cherished. And it was really my favorite coffee mug. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
being that I bought it on my honeymoon in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, made it even more sentimental to me. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it broke. I dropped it, right? Maybe just a few years back. I dropped
Okay.
it and cracked it in a bunch of different pieces. And I didn't want to just sweep it up and throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on Mr. Google and started, searching how I can put this coffee mug back together that it had been broken in so many different pieces, because even for sentimental reasons, I just wanted to hold on to it. And that's where I landed upon this, this idea of Kintsugi, which is a Japanese, it's over 500 years old as far as an art. I've really identified with it as well in leadership. And I
Mm.
want you to talk a little bit more about this, but you've written about Kintsugi leadership as a mindset or tool to help process setbacks quicker with more grace and less damage to the influence and trust between team
Mm.
members. So
Yeah.
first, kind of give us an understanding of the art, the concept behind Kintsugi.
Yeah.
And secondly, share more about how a Kintsugi style of leadership can help redeem failures, setbacks, and maybe even put back together broken or fractured relationships on teams.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really that long ago that I was introduced to the art style. But I honestly don't remember where I heard of it. But I was intrigued by it because I saw a picture of it, and it's actually a lot like the picture on the website for the article. Entasi consulting.com, and you can go on there and look at the article, and there's a picture. It's a black vase with just gold veins running through it. And when I first Googled it, that was it wasn't that exact image, but an image like that popped up, and I was like, number one, that's amazing, and number two, it just immediately stuck out to me just as the perfect picture for redemption, this idea of redemption. And the art style is taking broken pieces of a vase or a pot, and rather than just sweeping it up and discarding it, using some sort of a precious metal, typically gold, and using that to reform a new vase or pot, with the bigger pieces that were broken. And what does that do? I mean, it increases the value of the pot, which I just think is amazing, because it has value originally in its original form, if it's a clay pot or a stone jar or whatever. But when it breaks and then you infuse the new product with gold, it's more valuable. It's got gold, interwoven into it. And so for me, that it was just too perfect of a picture. And so I kind of thought about it for a long time, but really, it's just, for me, there's no better picture, really, in the art world, certainly, of what redemption is. And so, Kintsugi leadership. I didn't really like coin that phrase until I was almost done with that article. But it really just kind of worked out really well, of just, considering any sort of a situation that is broken and maybe it's fallen to pieces. You've got an opportunity there, right? You can just discard everything and say, either the person or the products or whatever the case may be, it's all just gone, and we're just going to have to start over completely fresh. And that's a real challenge, and that's kind of a heavy call to make, especially when you're dealing with people. We all have people in our lives that they're consistent, and they're there, and they're great people, and they're great workers, whatever. They're great athletes, but they're going to make mistakes, and so you have to have some level of understanding that the ball is going to get dropped, the pot is going to break, and so. So in the article, I talk about this idea of the mistake that happens being kind of creating a new reality, um, and you have a choice to make within that new reality. What are you going to do with the pieces? And then in the image, the gold then becomes the value that you've added through that new reality, um, to recreate or build the person up rather than just sweeping them away.
Yeah, because it's certainly the most easy thing to do, most comfortable or convenient thing to do in any broken relationship is to just sweep it away, right?
Right.
Uh, and many leaders have done that with their leadership sphere. Is that when the cup gets broken, the mug gets shattered. Well, let's just go find another mug, right, and
Mm-hmm.
start all over again.
Yeah.
But eventually, that mug's going to get dropped, and the next one's going to get dropped, and the next one. So there is this beautiful imagery of redemption when we can actually put pieces back together. And like you said, in Japanese culture, they actually see that vessel as being more valuable than actually before it was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that there's definitely a truth to that in our relationships and team building as well. So what would
Yeah.
you say maybe for someone who wants to be maybe a Kintsugi style leader, right? What are some of
Mm-hmm.
the things should they maybe pursue, disciplines or habits or just virtues that they should aspire to if they want to be this person that
Mm-hmm.
really builds resilient teams?
Yeah, that's a good question and a good thought. And I think, you know, again, sticking with the imagery, what makes up that gold that is used to build the vessel back together and add that value. Um, when somebody drops the ball or somebody fails at something, there's really no better time to kind of step in and say, okay, how do we need to move forward, and what are some things that I can train you in or some skills I can pass to you so that doesn't happen again. And I think there's several disciplines or mindsets that as a leader you have to have in order to really even get there. And the first thing is you got to have ownership. You have to understand where your role as a leader, either you at some point, um, you have to be able to see where you fail to set that person up for success, whether it be lack of communication, whether it be lack of training, whether it be
Mm,
lack of opportunity to execute. And yeah, it's not about removing responsibility, but it's about understanding like as a leader, I could have done better to put them in a better situation. I should have pursued clarity more. And so I think that's the first thing to do. The second thing is just understanding that, 9 times out of 10, if you have somebody on your team, they know that they dropped the ball. And so it's not about, I've been in situations, even in playing ultimate frisbee where, I would, drop a pass or make a mistake, and multiple times in the game, and every time, the person who was leading the team, there was like a 5 or 6 minute coaching session every single time, and at some point, the coaching, you don't need a sermon every time, and so being able to say like, hey man, this is one of my top people or one of my people, and they know they dropped the ball. So really just stepping in and saying, hey, what do you need from me? You don't have to rehash it. You don't have to, beat a dead horse type of a thing. You just walk in and you assess, and you don't ignore the problem, but you address the problem and you say, hey, I know we're going to try to move forward together. What do we need? And really that's just empathy. That's just understanding that mistakes happen. And then I would say the third thing on this is, as a leader, you have to go into those conversations, prepared, and you have to look for, okay, what's this new reality that's been created through this mistake, and what are some skills that I can pass on. I think intentional leadership changes everything, and so in order to pass those skills on, it can't just be just kind of a whim of like, oh hey, this happened, and let's move forward. It's a very intentional, like, hey, I should have given you this skill before, and then maybe the ball wouldn't have got dropped. But since it did, let me give you this skill now so that the next time the situation arises, you can navigate it more successfully. So yeah, I would say those three things. Number one, ownership. Number two, empathy. Not over coaching. And then number three is just the intentionality to give, solid skill, solid feedback, because that's really where the value is going to come.
I feel that's so empowering. I mean, as you're sharing these concepts, I think over my life, the span of my life, people who have been in my corner, people who have pointed the finger when I've dropped the ball, or I've fumbled the moment, and yet there's people that will overcoach. But having somebody that comes beside you and says, "Okay, we're not going to just push this under the carpet, right? You messed up. Mm-hmm. We're not going to dodge that. But what do you need from me right now?" I think when you said that, just stands out so much, because there's so much empowerment in that question. What do you need from me right now? You've blown it. You've messed it up. You've dropped the ball. What do you need from me right now? There's a word that comes to mind when I think about that, and it's called grace. In the spiritual realm, it's, looking to God as the one who never fails us, never falls short. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short. We've all messed up and dropped that ball. And yet God stands in our corner. Jesus Christ has taken the punishment of our sins upon himself. And Romans 8 comes to mind, where it says there's therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ. And that's a picture to me of Kintsugi, of Jesus coming, standing in our corner, and knowing we've messed up and not dodging it. We're not going to sugarcoat it. But what do you need from grace right now? And I can't think of anything that's more empowering that helps us to get up and then move in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's great. And I think grace and redemption, I mean, they just go hand in hand. But all of us humans, we're sinners, we're fallen. And even just in the practical realm, I guess you could call it, we just make mistakes, and you can't move forward in relationships, productive relationships, challenging relationships, sparring partner type of relationships. You can't move forward with those without grace, because there is going to be tension at some point, and there's going to be challenge at some point. Somebody is going to mess up at some point. And so if we don't have the grace or the desire to redeem that relationship through those mistakes, it's going to break down at some point. And in a real world practical kind of business or even team mindset, as a coach, if you're constantly over coaching, or if the ball gets dropped, the vase is shattered, and you step in, and there's just a lot of opportunity there within redemption, or to stand in their corner and say, yeah, what do you need from me? And what that does is that breaks down the tension, the relationship tension, because the person knows they messed up. So, maybe they're expecting to just get yelled at, or, whatever. But if you can kind of break that down and say, like, hey, you aren't defined by the mistake. Your value is more than the mistake. I tell people on my team all the time, there's nothing in this environment, in the retail store that I work in, there's nothing that you can mess up that I can't fix, that we can't move past. So you just have to be open about it. And yeah, maybe there's some hard conversations, there's some coaching that needs to happen, but that starts with me. And so, yeah, that's great stuff, man.
I just, I think one last thing I want to share about that before we move on to this next thing is a picture of that woman in John chapter 8 that was caught she was caught in adultery and brought to Jesus by really religious people, right? That they were pointing the finger and condemning her. And Jesus, dealt with them, and eventually, those who were pointing the finger, they all scattered. And when it was just Jesus and that woman, uh, she had fumbled, right? Everything had been
Mm-hmm.
shattered at that point. She's standing before the God of the universe in flesh. And Jesus says, "Where are those who condemn you? You know, they're not here anymore. Neither do I condemn you." And then he says, "Go and sin no more." So it's as if he stands in her corner. What do you need from me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Grace,
Yeah.
forgiveness.
Yep.
I need to be liberated from the bondage of this sin and this shame. But now go and sin no more. He points her in the right direction. And
Yeah.
that came to mind as you were talking about that, is it's as if Jesus just stood there in the corner with her and said, "What do you need from me? Here's grace. And now I want to show you how to walk this out in victory, moving forward." We all need people in our corner that
Yeah.
are going to be able to empower us when we have failed, right? And fallen
Mm-hmm.
short, and do it in a responsible way. So, Mark, let's transition into this initiative that you have coming up. This fall, you're launching an online course called Lead Your Sphere. So tell us about that and what your goals are with this new initiative.
One of the main parts of the vision for Entasi is I call it accessibility, and it comes from this idea that, as you said in the intro, leaders are needed in all aspects of life, all spheres, and really all contexts. And I firmly believe that intentional leadership changes everything. And so, lead your sphere is really, it's not rocket science. First of all, it's not anything new. There's no groundbreaking new scientific, it's stuff that I've learned over the years and I've applied over the years, and I've seen how it works. And it's really just a framework of leadership. And it follows basically, four main principles: know, serve, own, and lead. Um, and the goal behind that is to give practical, simple leadership principles, that people can apply within not so simple contexts. And I think that's the thing. That's a big thing about leadership, in the sense that the concepts, if you read about them, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. Oh, that is how I should treat people. Or, oh, this is, it makes sense. So sometimes it doesn't feel real groundbreaking. Um, but the groundbreaking aspect of leadership is when you actually apply it. It's not just about staying in your head and you've read all these books and you know about it so you can talk about it, but it's when you actually apply it in the life of your kids, when you apply it at work. For me, my kind of beginning path into leadership wasn't a glamorous situation. Simply put, I was working in a retail environment and I was given an opportunity to hold a set of keys and have some responsibility for some of the other people on the team. And that's really where it started. But I was intentional in that opportunity. So that's kind of the groundwork, the baseline for Lead Your Sphere.
So a lot of our listeners would be involved with youth ministry, sports ministry, and even serving in places like juvenile detention centers and even some prison and correctional ministries, where going back to the Kintsugi, where there's been some brokenness and some fractured relationships and some just some broken things in life. How might Lead Your Sphere apply to those in any of these places, whether it's youth ministry or sports ministry, even juvenile center ministry, where teens have perhaps even given up all hope, of their future?
Yeah, the thing about Lead Your Sphere, and really why it's named that, is I believe that it can be applied into any sphere. And the first thing is just know your sphere, and also know yourself. And so there's a big emphasis initially with knowing who you are, what motivates you, kind of what makes you tick. And I think that's valuable because people in a ministry setting, you have to know who you are. You have to know your strengths, but you need to be aware of your weaknesses so you can surround yourself with other people who can kind of cover your blind spots. But I also think there's a liberating aspect of just understanding that there's no there's no good or bad qualities in people. There's qualities that manifest in good or bad ways, positive or negative ways, depending on how we react or how we handle situations. And so, I think knowing yourself, what excites you, what your kind of more natural giftings are, what the giftings that the Holy Spirit has given you, things like that. It's liberating because you no longer have to try to be somebody that you're not. And as a leader, you can't try to be somebody that you're not. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, people will sense that, and they will not be drawn to that. You have to be able to be authentic. And so, I mean, that's step number one is, just being comfortable with who you are and understanding that you don't have to be somebody else to be a leader. And so that's the first aspect of that I think adds a lot of value. And then the second one after know is serve. And, I think in the Gospels, the life of Jesus, I mean, if you want to see the greatest leader of all time and how he instructs the disciples and how he leads with grace, he leads with redemption, but he leads with a service mindset. He's not there to conquer with armies. He's there to win the hearts of people because of how he serves them. And so I think those are, kind of that's the first two aspects of lead your sphere. So I would start with that, and I would say, asking that question, what do you need from me? We've talked about that several times. That's a service oriented question. If you're not willing to serve, then you're not going to ask that question.
Lead Your Sphere with Mark Betts is going to be launching this fall, and you can find out more about that on his website. So, Mark, lastly, I love this question. I ask a lot of the teams that I've been a part of. It's one of the questions that intrigues me the most, and I think it's something that makes us really think about what we're passing on to the next generation in our leadership as well, right? And that's, if you were on your deathbed right now and could only pass on one leadership principle to that next generation, what would that be? That one thing that you're saying, you just got to have this in my departure. You must have this leadership nugget, this principle, this discipline or virtue or whatever it is. What is that one leadership thing that you just got to pass on to the next generation?
Oh man, that's hard. Because I feel like with my breakdown with Lead Your Sphere, all four of those things, know, serve, own, and lead, and each of those breaks down even further into three sub points. But I think it's a challenging question because I just want to stick down and double down on the service mindset. I think there there's an aspect of leadership where it's telling people what to do, or you're getting results, you're trying to but if you can't win or earn the influence of the people within your sphere, then they will not follow you. There's different types of spheres. Obviously, we'll get into that in the course, so you should definitely check it out. But there's formal spheres and informal spheres, and so in a more structured environment, people may follow just because they have to if they want to keep their job. In a less formal environment where people don't necessarily have to, well, how do you get people to move towards a vision? You have to win their hearts, and you have to show them that you're taking the steps first to guide them there and to lead the way. And I just don't know how else you would do that besides being willing to take the first step and serve and ask the question, what do you need? How can I help you? What do we need to work on together? And just being a servant in every aspect of it. Do you have the right equipment? Do you have the right training? It's not about me and my comfort as a leader. I've reached a certain status, so I'm just going to phase out and, let everybody do whatever, do the work. But really getting in there and being intentional, having that service mindset of, we're doing this together. I'm still in it. We're still doing battle together. We're still, in the game together. How do we move forward together? So yeah, I would say just look to serve other people. Follow the example of our Savior, and what he did and how he won over the disciples and served them when they went around with them.
Yeah, it says of Jesus in the scriptures that he did not come to be served, but to serve others and to give himself as a ransom to others. And I think you said that earlier in the conversation, the greatest leader ever in human skin, in flesh and blood, Jesus, the premier example, came to serve others and give himself as a ransom to others. Very well put, Mark. Appreciate you for coming on the episode. Anything you want to leave us with today before we sign off here?
Just thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for, listening to me talk and engaging in that way. And if any listeners, they can go to my website, entasiconsulting.com. Check it out there. You can follow the links through there to my social. And I've got a lot of vision for it. I'm passionate about it, excited. But at the end of it all, at the root of it all, I want to help people develop into leaders, whether that be, in their family, in their ministry, in their job, whatever the case may be. Just want to help people lead their sphere. So thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, man. And that website is entasiconsulting.com. And I imagine that if anybody is looking for a really good ultimate frisbee coach, that they could also contact you through that website too, right?
Yep, that would work too. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mark Betts, thank you for coming on the podcast today. We'll look forward to catching up with you again later.
Thank you, Jimmy.